Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. There we go, live on Instagram. Welcome, everyone. My name is Joelle Simone Maldonado, aka the Grave Woman, and I am joined this evening by the beautiful
Oh.
Shannan Guillory. Am I saying your last name right?
Klaus Guillory.
Guillory. I'm so sorry. I'm country. Guillory. And I'm so excited to have you, Shannan. I remember when I reached out to you, I don't even know how many years ago when Little Miss Funeral and I were doing our birthday giveaway. And you were like,
Hmm.
whatever I can do to support and be a part. And you've just always been that girl's girl. And I just want you to know how appreciated and loved you are from this end. And I'm sure online with your audience. But I just appreciate that about you. And so
Thank you.
before we get started with your earth and chakra shaking quote that you shared the other day, I just want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to the Death and Grief Talk podcast listeners and all the listeners on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Hi, y'all. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm Shannan. I go by I Do Death on all the platforms. I'm a California-based funeral director, and yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I'm a girl's girl. Like, I don't believe in gatekeeping. I think there's enough for everybody. And I'm here for the people. So I'm really just thankful and humbled that you've asked me to join you. And I just appreciate our relationship so much. And I'm excited. Let's get into it. So, hi, Instagram peeps. Hi, Facebook peeps, YouTube peeps, and the podcast peeps. Listen, we're just here. We're just here. We're just hanging out.
Yes, we are. I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I'm very new to StreamYard, and so I think I'm live everywhere. But if I'm not, or if something is coming through weird, okay, we're getting comments to say hello, so I did something right.
Hey.
So the other day, you and I were talking offline, and you said something that truly and honestly made me stand up in my integrity, my authenticity, and really honestly moved me to my core, Shannan. The words that you spoke were transparency trumps compassion. And you were saying that in reference to communicating with families, especially during COVID, when what we could do as death care professionals wasn't what the norm, what we're used to, right? Or what our consumers are used to. But the more I sat with that and spent time with it, it resonates across every area of life. I've had to sit with that in my marriage, in my relationship with my family, with friends, and it was like, oh my god, this is it, this is something. So would you mind elaborating a little bit on that? And you just said it so casually.
Yeah, so I am just very much a it is what it is type of person. And I see something, I say something, just kind of call it as I see it. And I think, just speaking in terms of what we do, I think the general consensus or the general perception of the funeral industry is that we're there to comfort people and make them feel better, and to help them through this really horrible thing. And all of those things can be true, but I think the ways expected needs to shift. I think a lot of funeral directors tend to, especially newer ones, tend to be afraid to really kind of tell families what's going on because they're worried about upsetting them further. And they try to sugarcoat it, and they try to kind of flower up parts of the process that can be a little messier. And I think that in that, while the intentions may be good, it may be coming from a good place. It usually is coming from a good, compassionate place. But what ends up happening is when you kind of flower up what's about to happen, or what the next steps are, or what you need, or even kind of the level of urgency because you're afraid of bothering this family, things may get missed. Details get missed. And then the family, it doesn't matter how nice you were, it doesn't matter how, if you gave that mama a big old bear hug, it doesn't matter if at the end of the day, if the services like rendered are not what were promised, they're going to be upset with you because they trusted you. And it's our responsibility to shepherd these families. It's not our responsibility to make them feel better. They've known us for a max of several days if we've never served them before. And they, in most times, have lost one of the most important people in their lives. So who are we to think that we can come in and wave this magic wand, drop in some platitudes, and now they just feel better? No, that's not our place to do that. Our place as funeral professionals is to like help them understand what's coming next and what to expect in the days ahead, and also what we need from them to get it done.
Mm.
Anyone can, and but I'm sorry for your losses. They're going to hear that a million times over. And a lot of times coming from us, and this is an unpopular opinion, coming from us, it doesn't mean much to families because they know we say it every day. I personally have completely removed "I'm sorry for your loss" from my vocabulary. And instead, I say "thank you for trusting me," because it's something that you can say to every single family and mean it every single time, because you don't know if that person really did, even if it's technically a loss to them. You don't know what their relationship was with this person. A lot of people are making arrangements and navigating really complicated relationships with the person, maybe haven't spoken to a parent in years, but got a call from the coroner and they're next of kin. Now they have to handle this. So I think it's more important for us to really kind of set the stage. And that does not mean that the words need to be rude or curt, but they need to be clear. And so that way there's no miscommunication about what's going to happen next, what the expectations are on how long it's going to take, and what you need from them.
You are absolutely right, Shannon. And that's something I've really been intentional about as well. Not saying I'm sorry, but I have been so guilty. I tell people it should have been clients. And that's where that relationship should have ended, but it didn't. And that's on me. But I think there's so much to unpack in just those three words that talks about boundaries, not only for yourself, but for that family, both enforcing and setting and being respectful of, right? But that also talks about a level of self awareness within oneself. And in order to even be transparent, you have to have a certain level of self awareness. And I know your story. If you would not mind sharing what your experience was with grief, and please talk about all the things that you have now and at the end. But I think that, that sounds deep when you hear it. Oh, transparency trumps compassion. But that has to come from an authentic place. You have to be in a place where you can be authentic. So how did you conjure up that transparency within yourself and learn to walk in that?
Wow, that is a loaded question. I think I've always been kind of what you see is what you get, just as a person. I grew up in South Central LA and born and raised LA baby. And that's always just kind of been how I walk through life, very much like this is who I am. Like take it. And if you don't like it, like argue with your mama. I don't know what to tell you. But in when it kind of shifted, so I became a funeral director in 2010. In 2017, I lost my fiance very suddenly, 3 weeks before our wedding. He suddenly passed. And I kind of had to take a step back and realize that, like, as funeral professionals, we are doing this wrong. Like, we're not doing this right. At least that's how I felt. Now, I can't speak for every funeral professional under the sun, of course, but I can speak for myself. And at that point, I had had just a little under a decade of experience, and it didn't sit right with me how I was meeting with families. And so as I was kind of navigating this grief, I was looking for, I was reading the books, I was going to therapy, I was searching out other like grief coaches and things like that, just to kind of try to find something. And a couple of things that I noticed, grief is very, very white in the mainstream. And I mean, no shade to that, but it just wasn't, I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel seen. There were times where, especially when I went back to work, how the way my grief manifested is very different, especially being like the only Black girl in an office and not showing up, or my grief wasn't showing up in a way that I think others expected it to. And I was unapologetic about it, as I am about most things, if not all things. I'm very much, stand on business. I said what I said. And I think that that was made the journey, I think, a bit more tumultuous, at least in my opinion, because I wasn't finding the resources I was looking for. And so I started to create them. I was blogging at idodeath.com. I had been blogging for some time and just sharing my experiences as a funeral director and sharing stories. And I also started writing. I just started writing. I've always been into words. I did slam poetry in college. I did, all types of things. I love to write, and so that's what I did. I started writing. I started journaling, and I started writing short stories. And what I did was I took the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief that most people know, and I penned a short story about each one, which kind of it did turn into a coffee table book. It's called Dear Grief, You're a Bitch. And it was just sort of my way of navigating this time. And they're meant to be journal prompts. Like, you read each story and, they're meant to be journal prompts to kind of help you get that flow out and just write whatever comes to mind. Because that's what really helped me during that process. Eventually, I ended up launching a podcast that came out last October. It's called Get Stiff, with myself and my very good friend Alexis Hart, who's also in death care. And Lex and I, have really hard conversations around grief, loss, everything in between, over cocktails. Every episode coincides with a themed cocktail, and we, just have a good time. And Joelle was kind enough to join us in season 1, and season 2 will be launching in August. So we're really excited about that. But I think that's kind of was a jumping off point for me to really take a look at how we navigate grief. And especially, I think about even making the arrangements for my fiance at the time. So much of that process is murky, and it's just like, if I didn't already know what was going to come next, I would be so
Mm.
confused. If I didn't already know what needs to happen every step of the way, because the way that you're explaining things, like, I was finding I would have to explain it to the rest of his family. I would kind of have to translate what was said. We all speak English, but I would have to translate what the funeral director said to the rest of the family. And that's when I realized, it's like, we're so worried about hurting a family. They're already hurt. They're already broken. It's not going to get any worse than that. Like, it's done. The damage is done. They're already at their lowest when they come to see you. And so you are not a source of comfort. You are a guiding light. And someone has to hold the flashlight so everybody else can see. Someone has to know where we're going. And I think that's when I realized it became more important, because I think there's a lot of power in information. And I guess more often than not, when I'm giving families, instructions or kind of an overview of the process or what's going to happen next, I'll get as detailed as you want me to. But I'll always ask and say, if any moment, if that becomes too much, please stop me. But at the end of our time together, I never want a family to walk away from this experience and say, I wish I knew I could have done that. I wish you would have told me. I wish you would have done whatever. I wish this thing would have been possible. And I never want a family to have that feeling. And by presenting all of the information that I have and making sure that at the very least, one person from the family, you have your point person, knows what the next steps are. Because I'm not calling Aunt Janice and whoever, and I'm not doing that.
Yes.
I'm one person who's my go-to. And you give that person the information, and then you give that person their homework. And I think that is probably what shifted it for me. Did I answer your question? I feel like I'm rambling.
You really did. And I have a follow-up question to that. But there was a question from Smiling Happily on YouTube. She wants to know, Shannan, did you work in a corporate setting? Allegedly.
Allegedly. So I have worked and I'm about to give you my political answer. I have worked both in the private funeral home sector as well, like family-owned funeral homes, as well as like big corporation owned funeral homes, as well as like individual corporations as well. So I've done just about it all in terms of the types of structured funeral homes. I will say that. And you laughing, Joelle, because you know. But
Allegedly, that's all I can say.
allegedly, but I will say, in some larger funeral homes, it's interesting how when I was navigating the bereavement process, I will say that to work in death care, like you'd think they'd have a solid bereavement policy. You think that they wouldn't fight me. You'd think. Um, it was very fortunate. I'm very fortunate that I just knew how to navigate the process and I was able to take the time off. I took off 2 months, and that still honestly wasn't enough. But yeah, thank you for that
Francis
question.
Johnson. Francis Johnson says, "Well, don't y'all sound happy?" Yeah, Francis, we real happy over here. We
Right?
figured out how to swim in water.
Listen, we friends. We go together real bad.
Right. But to just to piggyback off what you said about the translation aspect, and this is part of the reason why I do what I do, in all honesty and all sincerity. I cannot imagine losing a loved one and walking into a funeral home and not knowing anything. And I know millions of people do that on a daily basis. And if you don't have a funeral director that not only cares about you, but is able to do what Shannan said and allow transparency to trump compassion, I just don't know what that experience would be like. And so I'm grateful for funeral directors like Shannan. I
Oh,
really am. And I'm grateful for those words because it was almost like a checks and balances for me. Because I've been guilty, not necessarily of hiding information or trying to fix a family, but I get emotionally attached.
mm-hmm.
And that can be draining. It can become a complex and it leads to burnout. And especially post COVID in our industry, that is a very slippery slope, not only for the industry, but for the families that are being served. Because something that has happened in our industry since the onset of COVID, I hear a lot of people when I talk to people like yourself or some of our other colleagues, right? They use the phrase, it's a calling, or I
Mm-hmm.
just felt drawn to it, or this is where I'm happiest, or my heart is connected to this. Since COVID, I've just seen a bunch of businesses pop up. And I'm not 100% clear on the intention. You know what I mean? I don't hear that language as much in these newer businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed that?
Oh yeah. Oh, lots of pop-ups. I think, you know, I think that a lot of these companies do pop up to an extent with good intentions, and I think the people who join them have good intentions.
Oh yeah.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions about joining this industry is that people experience a loss and then say, well, I helped my family through it and I helped dress my whoever's remains and all of that. And so I think I could do this. And then those people like that never usually last very long in the industry because it's almost like, and I want to choose my words carefully, um, it's almost as if once you've worked through once you've kind of are further along on your grief journey or work through whatever your feelings are in relation to that passing, you're kind of done. And then people
Mm-hmm.
tend to step away. But I find that people who are drawn to this industry after experiencing a close loss, if that's your in, they usually don't stay around for very long. And people who get into it, especially now that a lot of funeral homes, like there aren't really funeral parlors anymore, there's a lot of like centralizing where the preparation is done, and so people can come in And at least in California, people can come in and take the licensing exam and, be a licensed funeral director and have never touched a dead body. So like that's a thing. I didn't go to mortuary school. I was in my undergrad career at UC Riverside, and when I took the exam. So, and I'm very open about the fact that I did not go to mortuary school. However, I was working in a family owned funeral home at the time and learned a lot. I spent a lot of time in that prep room and spent, a lot of time learning hands on. So I wasn't really, I don't know, I was never really intrigued by the idea of going back and doing more school. Like I have a sociology degree, I'm done. I didn't want more school. But yeah, I see a lot of that with these businesses popping up. And I don't know, I think the funeral industry needs to change. And I think businesses like this popping up are bound to happen because we're
Mhm.
going more and more towards cremation and other natural options. And traditional old school funeral directors are very resistant to change
Mhm.
and really are really behind in the times. And so it's natural if there's a need for something, like we live in a capitalist society. If there is a need for something, someone's going to pop up to serve that need in some capacity or another. Now, whether if it's in the best or most compassionate way, that's subjective, I guess. But I think that is probably why. And a couple of them have popped up in 2020 and 2021 and are now no longer in business. They didn't last because I think they just kind of saw a quick buck and didn't realize how much really goes into it and how much time and commitment goes into running a funeral home, even if you're only offering simple cremation.
You know what? I think you're right. And I think a lot of people don't realize what a liability it is, because
Mm-hmm.
having possession of human remains is a big deal. Like, there are federal charges attached to things that do and don't get done.
As we've been
That's
seeing in the news for a certain funeral home.
so yeah.
Yikes.
Let's I do have another question. But before I get into that, Smiling Happily says, the reason I asked the question, when you said your then employer did not know how to handle your grief. Thank you for responding.
Thank you for your question. Yeah.
That's a great question. And there is a
Yeah.
difference. I mean, we could talk for hours and hours about the difference, but I
Mm-hmm.
truly believe it's not so much whether a funeral home is corporate or private that matters. It matters whether that director has a corporate mindset or a
Yes.
place mindset.
Yes.
Um, Eric Ionic Media says, love hearing you all articulate these ideas. Is that my sister? you both
Okay,
do.
Ionic.
Yes, you're both doing an amazing job. Appreciate your insight. Thank
Aw.
you. If that's Deanne, I love you. I don't know what you're saying whoa to, but she said whoa, smiling happily. And they're having the conversation in the chat. But another thing I love about you, Shannan, is that your experience is so diverse, both corporate, private, but you also have what I consider to be the gold medal, which you've done management and you've also been the workforce. So can you talk a little bit about those moments in management when you're managing personalities, moodiness, being on call for 7 hours with no sleep, no dinner, any of those things that us as funeral directors go to, when you're navigating those challenges as well as the triumphs that we experience as funeral directors and the emotions, because we have those
Mm-hmm.
too, believe it
Mm-hmm.
or not. But what are some of those moments where that transparency trumping compassion, where have those moments come in management with you in those difficult
Whew.
conversations?
Whew. Um, I will say, wow, that's a great question. I'm thinking about my little funeral chickens is what I call them. My because I managed I didn't just like I managed a very it was a wide age range where some of my team was older than me. A couple of them were my Gen Z babies. I love. First of all, I just say I love Gen Z so much, and I'm a millennial. I love Gen Z, but it was really interesting to kind of navigate these dynamics. I will say, um, A lot of it, I think, comes from you have to lead in the trenches and not bark orders from a tower.
Mm.
And and provide the space. Honestly, a lot of people don't even want solutions. Sometimes they just got to get that shit out. Oh, sorry, can I curse? My bad. They got to get that stuff out. But
Yes, you sure can. Safe space.
but a lot of times people don't really want solutions, and I think sometimes people listen, especially I'm very solutions oriented, and I had to unlearn that, and realize that not everybody just wants an answer. Sometimes people just need to get it out, and by providing the space to allow people to get it out and say, I hear you, okay, and also being able to hold the mirror up in a way that's not condescending, and to say,
Mhm.
I'm here with you. And also in terms of the actual work, making sure, like, one of my biggest things was I will never ask any of my team to do anything that I A had not already done myself, or B would not be willing to do if I had the time. And I think they knew that, even in terms of like sometimes it was heavy labor. Sometimes we're setting up for an outdoor ceremony and there's tents that need to go up and greenery that needs to be rolled out and chairs. And it's just like, all right, how about everybody comes in, jeans and sneakers, and rather than one person taking 2 hours to set this up, we're gonna knock this out in 20 minutes. Everybody's out here, myself included. And I think that also, and just introducing play. Honestly, I think play in the funeral home is very underrated. I know we have a reputation for having a dark sense of humor, but allowing people to be themselves, and I mean genuinely, truly be their complete selves while still being respectful of others, and allowing people the space. If someone in like that whole, oh, so and so didn't say, Joelle didn't say good morning when she, came in, and it's just like, okay, you say good morning to her. Maybe did she? Are you sure she saw you? Maybe she's
Right.
having a bad day. But and I remember one instance in particular. I was talking to one of my teammates, and I was telling her, but she said, well, she always does this to me. And I said, no one is this important. I don't think anyone woke up this morning and said, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to center my entire day about finding everything I can do to piss this person off. Nobody wakes up thinking that, no one wakes up and thinks that. And I think kind of giving people grace,
Mhm.
the same grace that you would want allotted, because it's just like everyone's fighting. I saw this quote on either TikTok or Instagram. I don't know. Auntie's old. But it said, everyone you know is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always. And that does not mean be a doormat. But that means maybe choose your words with kindness and respect, and you can still hold a boundary. You can still hold a boundary, but I just, I felt it was hard. I guess that's the short version. It was hard. And I think I spent a lot of time uh, settling, at least, especially in the initial transition, just settling disputes more than doing my actual job. But I think, yeah, I think now, like, even I think about some of the team members that I manage, and we're still really, I'm not there anymore. Thank you, sweet little brown baby Jesus. I'm not there anymore. But there are people that I still keep in contact with that I do care about very much. And I was really invested in their growth. And I'm just very proud of the people that they are now and where they are in their careers.
That's so beautiful. And I can imagine how, like, I think about the people that raised me in funeral service, like Mr. Daniel Gillis and Anita, and, just so many people along the way, Mr. Souls and Mr. Moses, and Mr. There's so many people, right? Even like going back to
Mhm.
mortuary school and the educators. But it's like, when you have a team, whether it's your classmates or the people you work with, or even people at the medical examiner's office or the crematory, like, we truly become a tribe because we can
Mhm.
relate to something that other people can't. We're up and we see each other when other people don't. And that thing
Mhm.
that you said about having a bad day and walking in the door and not having to be performative, you know what I mean? Like, but you almost do to a extent with families, but with your team, it's just a beautiful thing. So we are actually about a minute or less than a minute off from our quoted time. But I wanted to also say the other day, and if she sees this, this is not like malicious. This was funny to me. But my husband was on the the phone with a coworker, and she was like, he was explaining to her that she didn't have to send an email individually to every person on the list they were trying to send. And it was like she was just having the hardest time grasping this, right? And I was thinking to myself, this would drive me batshit crazy to have to sit down and walk people through this. And so when you talked about Gen Z, I can imagine what it's like managing Gen Z, baby boomers, millennials, and then what's the one after the Gen Zs? The Gen X?
Ooh, I think Gen X is, my parents are Gen X. And then, yeah, Gen X, millennial, Gen Z, the new babies are Gen Alpha that are barely, I think, starting to enter the workforce. But,
oh my gosh. Like my cousin texted me today and he's like, yeah, somebody said they're going to pay me $100 an hour. And I'm like, you know what? You take that job. I don't care what you're doing. You take that job. He's 15. Nobody's going to pay you $100 an hour.
I know that's
like,
right.
what are you talking about, sir? But he believed it. It's just so funny. Let's go through some more of these comments. Someone was agreeing. Ionic says, yes, it was. She says, hi, Joel. That was my sister. Oh, my hubby. Hey, the grave woman. I love you. I love you too, babe. That's Mr. Maldonado right there. Thank you, babe. He's in there ringing my babies. They're barking and running back and forth. But before I let you go, Shannan, I want to ask, without getting into much detail, what has been the most transparent moment that has had to trump compassion for you?
Oh, that's an easy one, actually. The most transparent moment. So during the pandemic, one of my really good friends lost her husband, and I was her funeral director. And having to flat out tell her, because she was on the fence about whether or not she wanted to be there when the cremation took place. And so I had to sit there and walk my homegirl step by step through what this was going to look like. It's been X amount of days since the last time you saw him versus now when you're going to see him. This, the crematory is not a sexy place. It's very industrial. It's going to be hot in there. You're not going to be able to get too close because it's still COVID. You can only bring one other person with you. And even just what I had to do to push to even get them to allow that during that time. And I think that probably was the hardest, because it was someone that I knew personally, and very rarely, especially then, very rarely for me do those relationships intersect where it's somebody that I know personally, like out in real life experience, and the person who passed was also someone that I knew. And then having to have this transparent conversation and be like, no, I am not your friend right now. Like, I'm telling you X, Y, and Z, just like I would tell the next person. But if you choose to do this, I will be there with you. I will hold your hand. Like, I have your back. Like, I will be there with you. And did I want to be there and watch him be cremated? Absolutely not. I didn't go when my own fiance was cremated. I didn't go because I didn't want to be there. Did I want to watch no. But I think that probably was the hardest part. I would probably think that was the hardest part, having to be there and watching someone I knew go into the retort while explaining to my very good friend, his wife, what was going to happen and what she needed to expect. So that probably was the hardest time for me, I think.
Thank you so much for sharing, Shannan. Just thank you for being you and just being awesome. Just thank you. Before you go, please let us know where we can, or let our listeners know where we can listen to Get Stiff, where we can purchase Dear Grief, You're a Bitch, and where we can read more about I Do Death.
Oh my gosh, yeah, all the things. You can keep up with me on Instagram at I Do Death. You can keep up with me on X. I keep wanting to say Twitter.
Twitter.
Same thing. I Do Death. On TikTok, I.do.death, and you can listen to the podcast. You can follow the podcast at Get Stiff Podcast if you want, or you can find it on everywhere you get your podcast. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and it's Get Stiff, Stiff Talk, Stiff Drinks. And of course, idodeath.com. I'm really bad at blogging, but that's where the book is. That's where some fun merch is if you guys care. And then, yeah, you can join the mailing list and, see all the cool things we have coming up.
You got your hoops on tonight, Shannon? I can't
sure
see
do.
All right, that's right.
Sure
Beautiful
do.
Black girl hoops.
You can go to idodeath.com/shop and get your coffee mug that says, I wear hoops. I don't jump through them.
I love it. Thank you so much, Shannon. And thank you to each and every one of you that participated in the live chat, that watched online, and that will watch the replay. All of Shannon's information will be available in the description for this podcast episode and on YouTube. Live life, love hard, and we will talk to you next time.